My name's Jonah. I was in the Army for 3 years, and I was an infantryman. I guess the word veteran means someone who's served, someone who's made a real big sacrifice. I think no matter what you did in the Army, how long you're in the Army, the very fact that you went in makes you a good person. And I think veteran should be worn as a badge of pride. No matter what you did or where you were, it's something you should be proud of and happy that you did. So I think one of my favorite earlier memories, I want to say, was when I first got to my unit in Drum. It was my buddy Shellick, and remember, I was the new guy in an infantry unit. Okay, life isn't fun for the first few months, you know, a lot of menial tasks, a lot of horrible moments like that. But our very first training event, I'm out in the middle of some field in northern New York, and it's hot, it's humid for some reason, and we're doing SRM, then we do night SRM, we're doing shotgun quals, we're doing all this stuff. It starts raining, and that's my first real training event. I'm exhausted, I'm tired, and we go back up the hill to where our hooches are built. And by hooch, I mean it's literally just a poncho that we have laid over our stuff. My buddy Shellick's under it because he had built it because I was busy. And I lay down right next to him, and he goes, "Hey man, I just want to tell you, I know it sucks, but," and then he just stops talking out of nowhere. And I was waiting for the rest of the sentence, waiting for it, and I turn over and he's dead asleep, just mid-sentence. And I was like, all right, whatever. And so I fall asleep, and I wake up at 2 in the morning to something on my face, and it's Shellick, and he's rolled over, and he's got this bear hug, and I swat him off me real quick, and he rolls back over. And I think it was every hour on the hour, I had to push this dude off me because he kept rolling over. We wake up in the morning, we're getting chow, and he's like, "Man, I slept great." And I'm like, "Really, Shellick? You slept great?" And I was like, "It wasn't fun for me, dude." But yeah, me and him became real good friends, and I think he was there for most of my first year, and he really helped me out. But yeah, that was one of my biggest first memories. He was our saw gunner, so he had our squad automatic weapon, and when I guess you could say inherited it from the team, he was gone. Everyone that I went in with, that were there when I first got there, they were all gone, so it was all a bunch of new guys. And we're doing platoon sticks, platoon training event, and I was getting annoyed. This is our third iteration of the day. We got done our dry fire, our blank fire, and then we're onto our live. And the entire time, I mean, I have an automatic weapon. I'd like to use an automatic weapon, you know? You give me 400 rounds, I'm gonna use 400 rounds. And the range OCs, they keep stopping me. They're like, "Hey man, you can't shoot over there. It's you just don't want to shoot over there. Keep your burst slower, do this and this." I'm like, this isn't how I'm supposed to be using a machine gun, but okay, cool. Finally, we get to the live iteration, and my team lead could see that I was getting a little antsy, and he was like, "Dude, just let loose. Just go have fun with it." And so we're working our way through this village, and we're at this wall, and then there's a berm 25 meters ahead of us. It was a target that pops up, and every time they pop it up, I would shoot it once, and it would go down, they'd never pop it up again, and I'd just sit there bored for 5 minutes. But they keep popping it, I keep shooting it, keep popping it, keep shooting it. I'm having a blast. And finally, at the range, you'll see taps me on the shoulder. He's like, "Hey man, you put a hole in the wall behind it, so we're just gonna stop popping the target." I was like, "Oh, damn." Then after that, we had to go into this trench. We set this hasty defense, and usually just the first target, they'd pop 4 targets, we'd shoot them down, and then it'd be over. But we get down in there, and I'm shooting, and targets keep popping up, so I'm keep popping, loading them down, and then one of our guns just stopped firing because it went down. I was like, "Oh, I got it." So I shoved get that gun over, and I start firing, and then the range OC's like, "Hey, you can't fire from there. It's too close. It's too close to the other gun." I was like, "All right, fine." So I move over. I'm firing from this new place, and he's like, "No, you can't fire from over there." And so I turned to him. I was like, "Dude, so where can I fire?" And he's like, "Go right there." So it's another part of the trench far at the end, and I'm shooting, and this is going on and on and on and on. They keep popping targets, and finally it stops, and we're getting our AAR at the end, our little after action review. And this full bird colonel, who's one of the OCs, walks up and he goes, "Hey, who was that saw gunner in the trench? Who was he?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I messed this up." And I was like, that was me, sir. What'd I do?" And he's like, "You know, we should have ended that a long time ago, right?" He's like, "We just all love seeing you shoot. You seem to be having a good time." And I was like, that's what I came here for. And it was the best training event I've ever had. It was wonderful. There's a training event in Fort Drum called Mountain Peak, which is right in the middle of winter when there's all this snow, and there's one, Fort Drum, a lot of snow, right? So I'm from Tucson. I lived in Tucson my entire life, all right? So I get stationed at Fort Drum, and it was purely horrible for me. And so it's like almost like it's midnight, and we're in this little fighting position. And my squad leader comes up and he's like, "Hey, they want us to start camouflaging the fighting positions. You just put like twigs around it." And I was like, "All right, fine." So it's like night, and I took off my helmet. And I just walk into the woods to start finding twigs and stuff. And I didn't bring my nods or anything, so it was dark. And somebody walks by and goes, "Hey man, what you doing?" And I was exhausted. I was tired, and I go, "I don't know, dude. I'm just picking up sticks. I'm just gonna pick up these sticks, and I'm gonna put them over here. And you know what? I'm gonna go pick up more sticks." And then I walk off, and he goes, "Okay, man." And he starts walking away, and I turn around, and I can see on his shoulder he's got this little the fluorescent patches. And he's got this Cobra 6, and it's our commander. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna hear about that. And I get back to to our little bivouac site in the morning, and my squad leader wakes me up. He's like, "Stock, did you yell at the commander?" And I was like, "Sir, he asked me a stupid question. What was I gonna do?" And they're like, "Yeah, you just stay low for the rest of this event." And he goes, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." But yeah, he didn't like me after that. I remember when I went to basic, and I mean, you have the in processing, and you're just on these wooden benches, and you sit there for hours at a time, and they take you on to do like medical examinations and all that stuff. And I remember they had a TV screen going, and it was just showing stuff that was at Benning, and one of them was air assault school. I was like, this is so cool, you know, like they're rappelling out of helicopters, they're doing all this cool stuff. And like I knew in the back of my head, like it's not as exciting as they make it look, but like I want to do that. And I get to my unit and I find out that Fort Drum's got an air assault school. I told my first team lead, and I was like, "Hey man, I really want to go to air assault school. What should I do?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't know about that, dude," and just walked off. And I was like, "All right, cool, we'll figure this out later." So I go to my squad leader, and I was like, "Hey man, I want to go to air assault school, and you know, my team lead didn't know anything about it, so what can I, you know, how do I get that done?" And he goes, I'll figure it out, but I'm kind of busy. I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Just tell me what I got to do, and I'll go get it done, you know?" And he's like, "You really want to go over my head on this?" I'm like, no, I want to go around your head. I want to skirt your head barely and get to the objective, you know?" And he was like, no. He was like, "You go through the proper chain of command." And I was like, okay. Well, it never happened, you know, for him. And it was 2 years later, you know, multiple training events, deployment, and finally I get back, and my platoon sergeant's like, "Hey, do you still want to go to air assault school?" It's like, "Yeah, let's go." And so I go. And then like day 2, I tear my bicep. Like, not like severe, it was a moderate tear in my right bicep. And I couldn't fully flex my arm or anything. And I was like, you know, got home that day and I was like, well, shoot, I can tell them and go the next iteration, you know, in like another 3 weeks. I was like, or I can just tough it out and do it now, because what's the harm in doing that, right? And so I tough it out. I ended up becoming, I was our class's honor grad, and it was a great time. But I remember that we had to, every time we left the air assault compound at the Light Fighter School, we had something called our 5 and dimes, which was you did 5 pull-ups and 10 push-ups. And 5 pull-ups with a torn bicep is the worst thing you could ever do. So I did that, and I came on, I was filling up my canteen, and my hand's just like shaking, and I can't fill up my canteen. And I did it, and it was the only like goal I'd ever set in the Army for myself that was like independent of like ranking up or my team or my squad. This was my only personal goal that I ever set in the Army, and I finally passed. And it was like this great moment. It was also one of the more sad moments. So about a year before, I married my wife, and she lived in Alabama basically the entire time I was in the Army, and I was in New York. We had met here in Tucson, we did volunteer stuff together, and she moved to Alabama to go to school. And I remember it'd been really stressful, we'd been fighting a lot because, you know, the distance and whatnot, and, you know, I didn't see her after the deployment and whatnot. And we, you know, I kind of got in my head because I was like, I could either be a good soldier or I could be a good husband, but right now I can't be both. And so I told her, I was like, I plan on reenlisting one more time. I was like, I'm gonna do 6 years, I'm gonna try to go down to Fort Campbell or somewhere else. I remember I woke up one morning, I was in my barracks, and I'm alone. And I remember I was just thinking, I was like, you know what, I can't keep doing this. You know, like I said, I can either be a good soldier, I can be a good husband. And I just chose to be a good husband. So I called her after air assault school that day, and I was like, hey, I'm not reenlisting. And that was, you know, I think it was about a little over a year before I got out. And, you know, to this day I miss it. I do miss it a lot. I miss it during class when I'm in a Zoom class, and I'm like, you know what, I just want to deploy again. This is, I could use another deployment. But yeah, I like to think I made the right choice, but it was rough. It was rough leaving. I do sometimes have like a feeling of like regret, especially because about 2 months after I left, my old unit deployed to Afghanistan, and I had a horrible sense of guilt that I couldn't be there. And this is one of like the sickest things I think about being in the Army sometimes, is you feel like you failed if you haven't sacrificed that much. And you get a bunch of, and I think that's like one of the reasons you talk about, like, I mean, one of the roughest things that I think everyone's dealt with, and I've had a few veteran friends that have dealt with this, is depression and all that stuff coming out of the military. And I think part of it is you don't feel like you fulfilled this, I don't know, I feel like there's like this like debt we feel we all have to pay. And when you don't, and you get out and you're fine, like you get out and you're like, well, I never saw combat, or, I never lost enough, you feel like you weren't a soldier. And not to like, make it sound like we're all a bunch of whiners, but I know it kind of comes off like that, but yeah, you feel like this like horrible sense of being unfulfilled, and it's very hard to like voice that to somebody, because like, I don't want to say like the civilians, but people don't understand that weird sense of like duty and sacrifice that comes with being a soldier and coming out of it. I had one of my buddies, yeah, I remember he was a good kid. He was not a great soldier, but he was a good kid. Funny guy, and he had just gotten back from Afghanistan. He was part of my battalion that left and went there, and he became one of my soldiers, and he was kind of a troubled child. And then he comes to me once, he's like, dude, I got some issues. And it was because of his deployment, it was because of his home life and all that stuff. And I ended up driving this kid to a rehab center in Connecticut. And it was a day trip, and I just remember like it was rough. It was rough for him, definitely, and it was kind of rough for me, because I felt responsible for the kid. And I got him back like 3 months later, and he was doing fantastic. He ended up getting chaptered out for some behavioral stuff, but he was in a good place. He was a lot better than what he was. And I feel like part of it is, yeah, that sort of like unfulfilled sense of duty that we all have, and it's something that we all struggle with. So Africa, we were guarding it was actually kind of ridiculous what we were doing. It was an Army Air Force base inside a Cameroonian Air Force base that we were pulling security on, but it was inside another Air Force base. And so you would be pulling guard out of a tower, and you'd just be staring at Cameroonian soldiers. And you'd be like, well, this feels a little ridiculous. And like, I think to sum up this sort of ridiculousness that I thought of it. Like, it was an important mission, obviously, but one of the ridiculous parts of it was we were building a sand table for a base defense drill. We're basically just building a mock-up of the base. And they're like, hey, these are, and they gave my team leader at the time a manila folder. My PL gave it to him. He's like, hey, this is confidential. He's like, just hold on to it. Don't do anything with it. Just hold on to it. My buddy's like, okay. And then he ends up putting it down somewhere, and it gets missing. And my PL's losing his mind. He's like, where is it? It's confidential. I could lose my job. You could lose my job. He's ranting about how, like, being a traitor, you can get shot or something. And it was weird. And so finally, they find the manila folder, and my team leader finds it. And he's like, you know what was in there? He was like, Google Maps photos of the base that anyone could have. And I was like, why? He's like, they just want to feel special, I guess. I don't know. And so, yeah, we lost our minds over that. And it was one of those weird, like, they were always like, we got to talk about security, and like, you don't talk about this base doesn't exist. But then it's like, they let locals come onto the base to like work, and they would go everywhere. And you're like, what's secret? Like, we would do like base defense drills, and they'd be all like, all right, hey, treat this like it's real. And we'd be all like going down and like going into tents and searching, like, but don't search that one. I was like, then how is it real? I'm like, no, just don't search that one. I'm like, okay. And so we're like kind of like cautiously working our way around the compound. We're like, we got to be more aggressive. And do what? Like, break in on somebody? But it was a fun time. It was a good time. You got to go, meet the locals. We got to go into the village, go to like an African zoo, which was really cool. They had a lion, and they don't have like the same rules on like safety as we do. So like you can get really up close and personal with the stuff. So that was a good time. We had a guy who worked at the DFACT, and we called him the Admiral, because for some reason he wore like, on his chef's uniform, he wore epaulets, and like he wasn't like in charge of the kitchen. That was a contractor that we had. But yeah, he would walk around all like professional and whatnot. He'd be like, oh, are you enjoying yourself? Good. How are you doing? Good morning. He was very professional, very well put together. We called him the Admiral, and he was a good time. Yeah, all the locals were really nice people, which I thought was going to be like, you hear stories from like dudes that were in like the invasion and whatnot, and they're like, yeah, the locals, they can be dangerous. And they went to Africa, and they're all really nice, and we're like, well, Are any of them dangerous? Like, they seem like very cool people. First off, don't try to outdrink a veteran. That's rule number one. But I think one of the best and most motivating things I could ever think of was it can always be worse. You know, like no matter how terrible it is in the moment, it can always be worse. I'm saying that for somebody who's seen that worst point. Like, you know, like you've always got a roof over your head. You know, you got all this stuff. You know, it can be worse. Appreciate what you got, really. There's people there that are doing way worse than you are.